go from there. So a big welcome to the third of our CPD workshop series on assessment of feedback practice. As I see, most of you have already been introducing yourselves in the chat. That's great. So as most of you will know, this series is based around the 100 Ideas for Active Learning book. But we've got some extra people coming in. Obviously, all of these ideas evolve as well. So it's been great catching up with people and for the opportunity for the book to be brought to life within the CPD session. There will be badges. They haven't been awarded yet, but there will be badges if you've attended sessions, the facilitators, and there are also champion badges, which I'll talk more about at the end, because don't forget there's another session next week, which is more of a reflection, bringing it all together and thinking about what we do with what we've learned during the CPD series. So today's session, I'm very happy to be able to introduce three great speakers, or activity leaders, I don't know what to call them, active learning CPD. So we've got Heather Taylor and Tab Betts from the University of Sussex and Richard Beggs from Ulster University. So enjoy the session, and there will be an evaluation link posted towards the end of the session. And do let us know if you attended one of the other sessions and didn't fill in an evaluation form, so that we'll send you out the link so that you can get the badge. So without further ado, I am going to stop sharing and over to Heather.
Hello. I'm just going to get my slides up, hopefully. Yeah, here we go. Lovely. Okay. Is it going to do it? There we go. Everyone see them all right? Yeah. Yep. Okay, cool. So my name's Heather Taylor, and as Isabel said, I'm a lecturer from the University of Sussex, where I mainly teach foundation year psychology students. And today I'm just going to sort of provide a bit of an introduction to the active essay writing programme that I developed with Wendy Garnham, who I'm sure you all know. She's in the chat anyway, Professor Wendy Garnham. Yeah, something we developed to help foundation year students in psychology with their essay assessments. Okay, so to begin with then, what is active essay writing? So essentially, it's a method that myself and Wendy use to teach our foundation year students how to essentially approach and complete essay-based assignments using their own independent thoughts, ideas and personal experiences. The aims of the approach are to help them to generate independent ideas rather than just regurgitating information, which none of us like marking, obviously, in essays. To help them develop their critical thinking skills right from the beginning of the essay preparation process, and to encourage them to be creative with their essays. Like this little bloke in the picture. So basically, the reason why we developed this programme was that when I was working as a doctoral tutor on one of Wendy's psychology foundation year modules, we discovered quite quickly that the students didn't really know where to begin with their essay assignments. They didn't put it quite as clearly as that. They often approached me saying, I don't know how to structure my essay. And then when I dug a little bit deeper, it turned out they didn't have anything to structure. So after a little bit more digging, we realised that students tended to do one of two things, neither of which was helpful for them with their essay assignments. So the first thing they tried to do, or some of them tried to do, was attempt to read everything ever written on a given essay title I think they were essentially putting the essay title into Google Scholar and getting thousands of different articles coming up. So obviously, this was really overwhelming for them because of it wouldn't be possible to read the sheer volume of literature that they would find from just sort of Googling the essay title. And also, in some instances, it led to academic misconduct. Firstly, because if you don't have any reason why you're including a particular article or piece of information from an article in your writing, then you don't really know how to paraphrase it or incorporate it into any particular ideas. So there was a sort of a lot of copy and pasting going on. Also, I think as a bit of a hangover from A-level studies that a lot of our students previously took, they assumed that there was almost one correct answer to any given essay title or question, which obviously isn't the case. But, you know, so if basically if one student decided to include a bit of information or a particular article, they all would. The other students perhaps were a bit more sensible, but it still didn't lead to very good outcomes. They recognised the sort of impossibility of reading everything ever written on a topic, so they didn't read anything. So they would sort of happily crack on with their essay, but it would just be very opinion-based without any evidence to substantiate any of the points they were putting in, no citations, no reference lists. So again, we had a bit of a problem with that as well. So essentially, in response to this, we developed the active essay writing program, and the sort of initial steps of it and the sort of basic premise of it, which I'm going to sort of share with you today in a little activity, is to encourage students to think first and then read second. So essentially, if we get them to think first, so to generate ideas based on their own experiences, their own unique thoughts, and to critically evaluate their own assumptions right from the beginning, then they can develop a much more focused approach and strategy to identifying relevant research evidence that they might want to incorporate into their essays. Just to point out with this approach, I think even if you haven't heard of the program before, it's not going to be unfamiliar to you. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're literally just showing students how the wheel was made. So, you know, whether academics recognise the process they use or not, generally speaking, it will begin with independent ideas and critical thought about these ideas before they attempt to write anything. And we're just teaching our students basically what academics do. All right, so that's enough of me talking, I think. So what I'd like us all to do now is to go onto the Jamboard. There's a link for that I can bung in the chat. Oh, here we go. Yeah, there's a link for that here. And we're going to have a go at the first couple of sort of oh, got some of my research there. Can you see my screen that it's changed to the Jamboard? No,
it's still on the slide. Yeah.
I'll just stop sharing and then share again. Here we go. So sorry, at the moment it's black writing on a white background. I don't know how to change that. But basically, what I want us to do as a team really is for everybody to independently put in their answers to things that they think might be relevant in answering the question, are dogs man's best friend? So essentially you can just get a sticky note from over here, type whatever you want on it, not that obviously, because that's not very good. Click save, and then it will go on the Padlet. Okay, good. So we've already got somebody who's written something in there. Okay, so somebody's put no other humans are man's best friend. Yeah, so just anything you think in response to that question, just put up there. It doesn't have to be a definite yes or no. it can be anything that might be relevant in answering this question. Oh, we're getting loads of things coming up. I'm just going to move them about. Okay. So we've got yes, unconditional love. That's a good one. So it depends on what we mean by a friend. So yeah, that might be something important to define. There's loads of stuff going on here. My students never do it this quickly. Okay, so we've got some ideas of where we might want to look here. So look up examples of where dogs have helped humans. Yes, if you like dogs. Oh yeah, just man or humans. I know it's a sexist phrase. I just went with the phrase. I mean humans. Does growing up with pets influence people's bond with dogs? Yeah, possibly. I'd imagine so. What else have we got? This is a long-standing viewpoint appearing as early as the Odyssey. There are different types of dogs. Not all dogs are friendly. Okay, very good. So stop with all of your brilliant ideas for now, because this is far more than I can manage. What I'd like us to do now is to pick a few different ideas and then to try and critically evaluate them. So something we do with the students to get them really engaging with critical thinking as sort of early on in the process as possible, and not just have biased ideas, essentially, is for them to critically consider their own assertions. So let's take this one, for example, because it's one of the first ones on there. So no, other humans, I think that's R. No, other humans are man's best friend. So does anybody have a critical assertion in relation to that particular point? Because there's so much going on the board now, it's probably better to put that in the chat or to audibly say it. So yeah, any sort of critical viewpoint on no, other humans are man's best friend. Has anyone got anything in response to that?
I do.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I would probably say, yeah, we probably need to define then what best friend is and whether a dog can fulfill that role of a best friend, because I think that's where the notion of human and animals coming from.
Yeah, very good. And it's kind of thinking about it, I guess, as a bit of a reciprocal relationship and what dogs can offer people. Yeah, brilliant. Has anyone else got any points on that one? So in terms of no, humans are man's best friend. I'm just looking in the chat. Also, the possible bias that may come from being a dog lover or not. Yes, so there's definitely going to be factors involved in the specific individual that are going to sort of dictate whether or not people are going to view dogs as their best friend or not. Dog is a companion rather than a friend, can be fulfilling to look after or growing plants. Good for getting out and about. Yes, very good. So let's have a look for some other ones. So this one, so we've got this one here, that dogs are food in some cultures. This one often comes up with my students, and it's obviously a really good opportunity for me to make sure they don't say anything racist. But yeah, let's consider this a little bit more though. So if dogs are a food in some cultures, does that necessarily prevent them from being man's best friend? What do people think in response to that? We do eat rabbits in our culture, and I've got 2 pet rabbits that have an entire bedroom to themselves in my house. That wasn't my choice, by the way, but they live here and I don't eat them. Yeah, so really good point. Most animals are food in some cultures. Also, arguably, I would say that the fact that we eat dogs in some cultures, same with all the animals, I'm not going to get too preachy about it, but essentially means that maybe humans aren't such a good friend to dogs. That doesn't necessarily mean that dogs aren't necessarily going to be a good friend for human beings. It can depend on if you're raised in the country or city. Dogs can be pets or working partners. Yeah, there's a lot of cultural sort of cultural variation, cultural relevance and so on in relation to this question. I'm just going to do one more quickly. Oh, someone's organising this really lovely for me. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Ah, here we go. What about this one then? So, I've got a dog, and I could argue the point on this one. Dogs behave as trained. So, yes. So, what do people have any critical thoughts in relation to that? My critical thought is that my dog does not behave as trained, but maybe that says more about me than my dog. I've literally locked him out of here so that he doesn't climb all over me while we're doing this session. The argument about dogs or owners are the problem with dangerous dogs. The argument about dogs or yes, true, very good. So you know, but based on the news at the moment and Rishi Sunak's priorities, we might believe that there are a lot of dangerous dogs about at the moment. But yeah, arguably, it isn't really the dogs; it's the people that are the problem. Okay, so what have we got in the chat? My cousin's dog failed dog school, so not all dogs can be trapped. My dog didn't even go to dog school. I think I've identified the problem here. Okay, very good. So I'm just going to go back over to the thanks, by the way, that was brilliant. Like, honestly, I mean, it does work in a similar way with my students. I can't say they generate quite as many ideas quite as quickly, but you know, so well done you. You're my best class yet. So, like I was saying previously, by doing this process, the students have a much more focused set of ideas with which they can direct their research. So looking up on Google Scholar and so on. And basically, the way we work in this initial stages, if they find evidence for an idea they've got, then that's great. And they can just, you know, read the abstract, pin for the moment, pin that evidence onto their mind map or put it in their list. If they don't find evidence to support a point that they're making or one of their ideas, they've essentially still learned something, which is really important. And then they just have the choice, really, of either adapt their idea or their argument to align with the evidence base, or depending on how many other ideas they've got and how well they fit together, they might just scrap that particular idea. The following stages, because this is only the beginning bit, are basically, oh, that went a bit too quick, are basically to piece all of the bits of the essay and the preparation together. So we will encourage them to organise whatever ideas they have left after looking for evidence into a certain number of themes, so that their essay is not so broad that they can't go into sufficient depth, but that it's also not too much of a narrow focus. For example, if we give our students a 1,500-word essay, we might encourage them to have about 3 or 4 broad themes with different ideas within them. Then, so that, again, we don't have sort of these biased one-sided essays, as well as encouraging them to critically evaluate their own assertions, we then ask them to apply their critical evaluation skills to the evidence that they've identified. And this is something that we model in every session anyway, based on the essential readings we give them. The next step would be to connect all of their ideas together, almost like a skeleton for their essay. So connecting the ideas, their evidence, their critical evaluations, not necessarily by theme, just in an order that makes sense to them based on their own narrative, so that the presentation, you know, and how the ideas are put forward all comes from them as well. And then essentially they've got their outline, they've got their evidence, they've got their structure. It's just about filling in the gaps. So either fleshing out their ideas into paragraphs, or sometimes they might connect a couple of ideas and recognize, oh, hang on a minute, I'm making an assumption of how idea A relates to idea B. I'm going to have to find some additional evidence to support that association. So yeah, that's basically how it works. But like I said, we only did the beginning bit because we do this over quite a big number of sessions. So thanks everyone for listening. And yeah, if you've got any questions, let me know. Oh, my dog is breaking in now.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Thank you ever so much, Heather. There is already one question in the chat, which is about, are you thinking of using generative AI as a support for this type of exercise?
So I don't know, because I'm really not that good with AI. I know that it exists, and I know that when I try and use it, I'm not very good with it. I'm not sure, really. I prefer for them to generate their own ideas. I think that from what I do know about AI is that it can reproduce stuff, but it can't really think. And the purpose of this approach is to get them to think and actually to value their own experiences. However, I'm not against it. I just don't know that it necessarily would work with this approach, and almost view this as an approach to avoid the need for AI and for them to recognise that their ideas are better than what can be generated from I can't remember chat thing.
Chat GPT.
Yeah.
Interestingly, it would, in some ways, it would. The question, the danger is the evaluation, but your initial thing would be quite good at generating prompts to then ask it questions. But
Yeah.
we've got some more questions coming in the chat, and but Christian's got his hand up. So if we go to Christian first.
Yeah, sure.
Hi, thanks, Isabel. It was more of a comment than a question, really, and it links on to what was just mentioned. The first thing that was going through my mind when you were going through this, Heather, was how this is potentially a bit of a savior of the essay from the threat of AI, because that's the one assessment mode that a lot of people, sorry, my camera's at a very strange angle. That's the one assessment mode that a lot of people feel is the most at threat from AI, whereas having this structured approach where there are defined stages of sort of the idea generation, the Jamboard, by requiring learners to follow this kind of structured approach to get to the endpoint of the essay, and requiring the submission of the idea generation stage as the evidence, it does make the essay a bit more of a robust assessment mode, as against looking at AI. I know that Arietta's question was around using AI in a positive mode, but there's also that kind of protection of academic integrity as well. So yeah, really a really interesting sort of slant on the essay to kind of look at making it a bit more robust against that kind of side of things. So yeah, really interesting. Thanks.
Oh, great. Oh, also, to add on to that, Wendy actually uses a portfolio style assessment mode for this, so that they actually have to put in their mind maps and then an annotated bibliography of key articles they found. So actually, we're encouraging them that not only is it good for them to independently think about things, but also they're essentially going to get points for doing so. So we're valuing their efforts as much as we are the final output, which is really useful with foundation year students.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you.
Brilliant. Heather, can you stop sharing your screen, and can I
Yeah.
ask Richard to get ready just for timing, because there's lots of good discussion going on, and there's some related questions in the chat which I'm going to sort of summarize together. Is sort of, are the sessions face-to-face or online? Do you use any specific tools, and how many sessions does this work over, and is it in core teaching time, or is this extracurricular? So I've thrown in about 3 questions there into one, but
yeah, so it is in core teaching time, which is difficult actually, but it is done in the core teaching time. But we do it across both the psychology modules, and it's taught within their academic development, so they get it a bit from different modules, which is helpful. In terms of, I've done it online and in person before. I prefer to do it in person, but you can do it online as well. I don't know how many sessions I do. We'll probably dedicate about three workshops to it, and then I'll do a lecture, a couple of hours worth of lecture. Depends on the sort of information that I'm needing to get across. Any particular tools I use? Not really. We can use Jamboards and Padlets. We've used Padlets before, so they can build up their evidence, you know, sort of through the process. What else do we do? Oh God. Oh, I do little things that are quite like manual. So I will, based on the ideas we've generated, I will put them into like lots of little strips of ideas, either on paper or on a Jamboard. And then we get them to organize them in the way that makes sense to them, to show them that not everybody in their group, you know, different groups are going to organize them differently. They all sort of come out nicely. It depends on your narrative. Loads of different things, to be honest, that I use. I change it every year, I think. So dependent on the cohort. So yeah.
Yeah, and maybe you could go back, have a look at the chat and see if there's anything I've missed there.
Yeah, I will
some
do.
Interesting questions. Can I have a very quick final question from me though? Do the students choose the topic, or are they all doing the same topic?
So I will give them different essay questions within the module that they can choose from, but we always model it via a separate essay question. I won't do the dog one because I teach psychology. So it'll be something relevant to what we've learned on the module, but there isn't an essay question they're going to be responding to, so that they can model it. And I do that throughout every stage of it. Even if it's looking for research, we keep going back to this related yet separate essay question.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you very much. That was brilliant. Cheers. Thank you. And now over to Richard.
I'm just trying to share my screen. Hopefully it starts to work soon. Which is a bit unfortunate. It's all working and I hit share and nothing happens. And you just can't see it? No.
Not at the moment, nope.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go to plan B, which is fine. I'll not share my screen, but you can follow on your device using the AirPod, okay? So if you click on that link or on a different tab or on a different device, if you have, go to nearpod.com and join nearpod.com and join using that, and you'll see my slides as I'm going through as well. We're going to use that anyway, but I've got a lot of exclamation marks happening across Zoom, so I'm assuming it's not going to work, but this will work just as fine, and then we get to see everybody's lovely faces. Okay, let's get rid of that. Okay, so I can see there's 5 in already, so I'll keep on going and you just keep on joining. Now there's 20 in. So now that the panic's over, hi, I'm Richard Biggs. I'm a senior lecturer in higher education practice at Ulster University, and I'm going to be talking about one of the chapters I have in this fantastic book that the Active Learning Network pulled together, and it's full of fantastic ideas. But my one is around digital storytelling and encouraging active learning through collaborative team projects. And it's a bit early to say collaborative, it appears. And it's through the assessment of that as well. So storytelling isn't new. Okay, it's been about for thousands and thousands of years. It's not new to any of us. And it's something that we have used over the centuries to make sense of things, share stories, get others to think about the way we are thinking, get them on board with us, and then just to remember things. But it is also the center of how we communicate with one another at a coffee shop or wherever it might be. We're always telling stories. How was the journey this morning? How was the weather? Did you see the accident last night? Did you see the hailstone last night? We always use it as a way of telling stories to one another, even in its basic form. I graduated from Belfast School of Art after studying visual communication. So I was a graphic and web designer, multimedia designer, and I worked in design agencies in Belfast. And I worked with these clients and amongst others. But the most common thing out of all of that was I used visual storytelling techniques to help sell their products. And that's very vital in digital storytelling. It is using that visual storytelling. So what I mean when I say digital storytelling, for this instance, it is a video file that's created that includes an audio or sound voiceover with images or videos that come together and animated on the screen. But mostly it has a strong emotional or an educational aspect to it, okay? And it can be fairly simple or it can be really complex. It depends. The example I'm using, I'm going to talk about in a second with the students that I got to create the digital stories, is somewhere in the middle. But you can use basic ones where you get students or participants to talk over slides and record that, and that's a basic form of digital story. But they can get more complex as you get more skilled in the production of them. But one of the most important things is that it's controlled by the storyteller. So I'm in control, and we're going to play about with that 1 wee second. So this is an image. You've on your devices, you'll see this. So we've got a picture of a cobbled street. So what I want you to do is grab the pen tool from the bottom. You can change the color if you want to get fancy, and circle the aspects that you think you could tell a story on in this image. There, I'm just circling Mo and Flo here. We're having a lovely chat about Ada, who won too much money in the bingo last night, and they're jealous. So I'll give you another few seconds, and then I'll move on. And I can see them all coming through here. Okay, so I think everybody's submitted. I'm going to go on a few seconds, just like quickly. You lose it otherwise. Right, I'll go on because the time is short. So these are the different things as a storyteller I can use and I can control, and you'll believe whatever I say because I'm telling it. And that's the key thing when we're going through trying to get our students to be involved. So what is it I do? And the chapter that I wrote is about this example. So there's final year hospitality management students. I was asked by colleagues, Claire Crothers and Harriet Perkins, to come along and do this for them. There's roughly between 60 and 120. 120 is the maximum we've ever done. And that was because of COVID in the year that people couldn't go on placement. So it was a big cohort, but it scaled fine. There was no issues with the scalability of it. But their final year project is about them designing a visitor experience. Okay, so they have to create a digital story that sells that visitor experience. Okay, they're split into groups of 6, and I normally go and deliver 2 sessions with them. I'm going to, on Thursday actually this week to deliver it. We have a 3-hour session in the morning where I go through digital storytelling techniques, etc. Get them to explore. It's very engaging, and they think about it and interact. And then in the afternoon we'll do breakout sessions in larger rooms where we work in digital storytelling, storyboarding, and script writing. And then there's other resources that are followed up as they need them in Blackboard. So the benefits of working this way, well, they're working in teams. They all have a dedicated role, and you can see them there that they then focus on and work together as a proper team. It's building their digital capabilities. They're sharing and learning from others. It's bringing together the student expectations aspect of digital being integrated. We're making them aware of copyright through Creative Commons, encourages reflection, and it's building the employability skills that they need employers are looking for. This year, I'm actually bringing in generative AI into it, and I'll show something about that in a second. But it's an authentic assessment. It's allowing that academic integrity to be there. It's a very reflective process. It's getting them to write and think about what they're doing, and generative AI won't be able to, well, at this moment in time, won't be able to replicate it. But for me, it's really quick to mark them. So when you have a large group of students, I think it's half a day for the group of 60 and it's a full day for the 120 because they're working in groups and teams, which is a great way of speeding that up. There are some challenges. Obviously, this is the part of the hidden curriculum. We'll have to get them up to speed, and that's why we have dedicated sessions for this and resources that they can help and support one another. There's always the risk of non-engagement from team members. I've never had this because it's final year students that tend to be keen to do the best that they can. there could be a digital shock depending on the discipline, but again, I haven't experienced that. But you can't use it in every module. It'll get repetitive and boring and different things. So you need to pick what's the best time to use it and when to use it. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll talk about the elephant in the room. Okay, this isn't generative AI. Okay, this, you see the elephant? Can you all see it? You can give me a thumbs up or a, yeah. This is a rock on the north coast outside Ballycastle in Northern Ireland. From the other side, it doesn't look like an elephant. From this side, it really does. Okay, and it's not generated in AI. But I wanted to start experimenting with generative AI to help produce images, because students need roughly 30 to 40 images when they're telling their story, and they're inventing a student experience, okay? So, sorry, a visitor experience. So they might not have the images that they need. They try and set up Christmas trees in September and take photographs and all the rest of it. But I wanted to try and experiment with this to make it a bit easier. So on Thursday, I'm delivering this for the first time with them. So I did a few tests. So Heather and I did not collude about talking about dogs, just happened to tie in. So I did a prompt in Stable Diffusion for creating a photograph of a tan and black Jack Russell Terrier. You can see it's not very tan and black, it's white and tan. But anyway, I kept on going to try and get what I was looking for. It became more cuter. It's a puppy now. The color's still not quite right. And it's at the bottom of the hill poking out. So it's having a bit of fun with this and just trying different things. And then I tried one more time just with a black Jack Russell Terrier, and there we go. It's probably more of the image I was looking for. It isn't a comparison to the real thing, because you can see the detail there. It is a lot sharper when you have a real photograph. This is Oscar. When you go back, you can see when you actually look at it compared to other things, it's a bit soft focused. So we're getting there, but I think for this purpose, it's really good. I couldn't get Oscar in a whiskey barrel because I don't have one. So these things obviously help us tell the story. And how we can use them. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I just wanted to talk. I played a bit when to put AI in, and I thought I'd do it now before we get out to this. So this is our breakout session. We're using Nearpod Collaborate board. So what I want you to do, think about a module that you teach where you're using teamwork or group work. That's where you should really focus on this and where it could best play out. And I want you to post them. What module is it? What discipline are you in? The level, and you can just put your institution in there if you want. So we'll start doing that, and you can add images and stuff if you want to start getting fancy. So go ahead and start populating that. You don't have to do it in a team setting. Obviously this chapter is about working in groups and teams. I also do it individually with people at different stages, but I think for this and this group of undergrads, it works really well with them. So go ahead and start typing in. I'll just make sure I am not holding anything back here. There we go, pending approval. I'm going to approve them. I should have turned that off. There we go. Market leadership, management, perfect. Level 6. Yeah, Vicky, I do it with individually as well. I found with these students working in groups, giving them the different roles really helped, because they're not from a creative background as such. I thought it was really good to pull in different skills. But yeah, I normally use it with individual people as well, because it's really strong for bringing out that reflective piece. Wait to approve these. I should have trusted you all. I don't know why I didn't change the settings. Okay. Oh, another lovely wee dog. Thanks, Isabel. Okay, so placement and reflection, yeah, adult nursing, cohesion and design, and it really, because it's one of those ones. It's not disciplinary dependent. It can go anywhere and everywhere. Motivational climate sports coaching level 7, yeah. I've done it with master's students as well in communication, digital communication, and they were working in partnership with community groups to create a story for them. So it works everywhere and everywhere. So that's super. Okay, I'm going to go on. I've got a few other things. I don't want to run out of time. So thank you for that. Now, there's types of digital stories. There's loads of different types of digital stories, and it really depends on your. You're limited by your imagination here, what way you want to do it. You can have personal reflection, and I use this as part of my first steps to teaching as the final piece in the assessment for those seeking associate fellow. And my colleague Brian, who's also on here, does it with the PG CHEP new staff, to reflect on the whole process. And at the end of that, they will gain associate fellows. It's reflecting on the process of engaging with the PSF. It's really, really useful. Or it could be about a project, reflecting on a project, a research piece, a journey they've been on, advertising, or selling an event or a product, as I do in this. So what I want you to do now, using Vivox, what kind of digital story could you get them to produce? Okay, and I'll just share that. I'll share the results. The thing on Nearpod as well, you can save your notes, save your slides. If you go to add notes, you can save all your responses if you wanted to put in your email address. So we can see we have 25 people in. We're just waiting for people to start posting. Video, great. I suppose there is other methods of digital storytelling that can be used, and for graphics, different ways, but this chapter is focusing on video, which is great. Module journey, yeah. Reflection at the end of it, what they've learned. Field trip, yep. Perfect. Personal development. Reflection. And it's really, really good at reflection. And why I like using it with the hospitality management students, it gets them to think about actually what it is they're trying to sell and what they're doing, and look at it from a different perspective, which helps them critically analyze it and produce something that's better. Some of the stories they've produced, I don't have permission to share them, otherwise I would, because they are student pieces. There's some have taken on the persona from the film or the TV show Dairy Girls. I'm not sure if you watched the Dairy Girls, but they take on the persona of one of them, and they're selling a visit experience of a tour around Derry. And they go to the different aspects from the Dairy Girls of the wee sweet shop and different things, and that was amazing. How creative they can be, putting on the character of somebody else as well. Loads of different things. Super. I'll leave that running so you can keep on posting. So where do you start? I've created a Padlet, which is linked to the actual chapter itself. So if you go into there, you can see example digital stories are there, example rubrics, learning outcomes example, storyboard examples, templates, Creative Commons stuff, the software you can use to produce it, the free software, iMovie for Mac and Windows Photo app, Audacity, which is a free audio editing, and then you can go down, and then there's links for AI stuff as well in there, so it'll get you up and running and started. But I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have. You can just contact me by email. I'm also working with Teddy Dragus and Chris Thompson, setting up a community practice around digital storytelling. And I've put the link here. We're going to be running an event in January sometime. I think Teddy's on the call. So you can sign up if you want to find out more about that. We're just creating a place for people to share and learn from each other. So that's in there. So that's me. Hopefully I'm on time okay, Isabel.
Yes, fantastic on timing. So would it be possible to share the Padlet link in the chat? because I know some people have had a bit of trouble with Nearpod, but
okay.
So have we got any questions for Richard? I can definitely see some great uses of this.
Okay, I'm just going to share the link to the Padlet. Hopefully that works for you. It's in the chapter as well, so you get to go to the chapter resources. It's at the bottom of the chapter.
Oh, cool. Brilliant.
Yes, Vicky, I'm happy for you to share and link anything at all with you can use anything you want. I think one of the things Teddy and I are thinking about is producing resources around actual digital storytelling. But hopefully that'll be a while, but hopefully we get that up and running so people can use that. Yeah, it's just Camille say /digital storytelling.
Sorry, I've lost my hand up icon, but can I ask a question? Do you get any students who are sort of resistant to the idea of doing voiceovers, you know, don't like recording the voices or whatever, and what alternatives would you use in that case?
It's funny. Yes, there is. And even within the groups, there's some people don't want to do it. That's fine. They use text in an interesting way and have that up, I think, and have a soundtrack at the background. So there's ways that they decide to do it. As long as the story's getting told, it doesn't really matter. So yes, that does happen. Somebody doesn't want to do the voice, and that's fine. And then it comes in, and they just have to be careful of the way they're telling the story and make sure it's readable and different things. Obviously, through this process, it creates a script, and that can be used to get closed captions as well. So it is everything you produce can be reused and can even be shared as alternative formats for students. But yes, it's a very good point.
Sorry, I've lost my hand up as well. I just wondered how you dealt with the inherent copyright issues in using generative AI for images, because you've mentioned that the generated images are Creative Commons, but a lot of the AI generators for image scrape images that artists didn't give permission to use. And I think that is one of my problems with generative AI for art.
Yes, it is one of those. It's a very good point. It's one of those ones that I'm going to raise it with the students. I think we're just learning as we're going along here with this, and trying to get sources that are probably better. I think there's one called Adobe Firefly. I'm not sure if you've come across that. That is probably one of the more ethical ones. It's not meant to actually pull on stuff that you just suggested. That they're using images that aren't copyrighted permission. So that's what I'm going to get my students to explore is the Adobe Firefly one. But I was just using that one as an experiment, to be honest, just to demonstrate what it can and can't do. But yes, it's very true. I didn't see whose name that was, but thank you for raising that.
Yeah, Beth's just put in the chat. Apparently, Adobe Firefly uses Adobe stock photos, and therefore artists are compensated.
Yeah, it's one of the more ethical ones, yeah.
Right, now we have got Tab will be next, but we are just I think he's just dashed out. So just bear with me one moment.
I'm back, don't worry, Isabel.
Oh, that's all right. I had got something to show them in the interim. But are you ready to go?
Pretty much, yeah. But if you want to show them something, that's fine too.
No.
Okay, so let me see if my screen share works. And let's hope my voice works, because that's been a little bit ropey recently. So There we go. Okay, so welcome everybody, and very excited to share my chapter about story game-based learning. Can I want to check that everybody can hear me okay, and also just for the fun of it, I'd like everybody to say a hello after 3. So if you're able to, then just give us a hello after 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go.
Hello.
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 There we go. So we do have a whole community here. And building on what Richard was just talking about, this fantastic idea of digital storytelling, I am going to talk about the idea of story game-based learning. And it's kind of making what we were talking about there a bit more collaborative. So thinking about how we create a story together. Can everybody see the slides I've got on my screen? Can I get some audio feedback?
Yes, but they're not showing
Well, we
presentation.
can see the editing screen.
Yeah, that's fine. As long as you can see it. Now you should see it in presentation mode, right?
Yep, correct.
Excellent. So the idea is story game-based learning, SGBL for short. And it starts from this kind of initial premise of what if academic courses were designed as story-based games? Okay, so I guess it's a kind of provocation for us to think about a different way of thinking about learning design in higher education or other educational contexts. And it's built on some theory around game-based learning. In particular, the work of Malone and Lepper, 1997. They came up with this idea of intrinsically motivating instruction, and they talked about how we can use elements from games and stories to create more motivating learning. And you'll see on my slides here, you've got these 4 elements. So there's challenge, curiosity, control, and fantasy. So making sure that learners have goals which have an uncertain outcome, and they get performance feedback, and that helps them to build self-esteem within their knowledge of the subject. Curiosity, so building sensory curiosity by having things that have aesthetic appeal as well as intellectual appeal, and the intellectual appeal comes into the cognitive curiosity, so trying to stimulate cognitive curiosity as well. And then giving them a sense of control, so actually being able to self-determine their learning journey, having power, having choice, having contingency. And then fantasy, which is an element we don't often think about very much in higher education teaching particularly, but bringing in the emotional aspects of learning, cognitive aspects, and endogeneity, which is kind of thinking about this idea of having a sort of story setting in which your learning experience takes place, or being able to stimulate the imagination by placing it within a context or a scenario. And then the idea of interpersonal motivations, the idea of cooperation, competition, and recognition. And it also draws on the work of James Paul Gee, and he came up with these 16 principles of good video game based learning. And it's much too kind of detailed for me to go into here, but I do recommend that you have a look at these principles, because he does a very good job of extrapolating from game design how learning design could be improved. So what does it mean in practice? So I have used this process for designing a module on film noir, and what I did is started with an immersive story setting. So you start from your learning outcomes and think, well, how can I link these learning outcomes to a goal within a story setting? So because it was about film noir, I thought, well, I already kind of have a story setting to work with. Sorry, let me just get a drink here. So if I create a scenario around a detective, so let's say I've got a detective who wants to solve a murder case, and I'm going to make it take place in the kind of dark back streets of downtown LA, because that's where many of the film noir that we're going to be studying take place. And so the protagonist, well, I want my learners to feel like they're the protagonist in the story. So maybe they could play the role of a detective. So they're a detective, and their goal is to solve this case. And the obstacle is that they've got limited information, and they're not able to find, they don't know who has done it, and they need to try and find out. So I created this sort of setting for it. And then I thought, well, how could I design my assessment to link to this? Well, I thought, well, a portfolio assessment might be a really good method of assessment. I know that Wendy and Heather talked about that earlier on. So this idea of learners gathering together a portfolio. So what I do is I created a kind of online web quest where it sort of directed them to various sources of information where they could find details about the films that they were studying, and this gave them information that would help them to solve this murder case. So they gathered all their information into a portfolio, and that was their assessment for the module. And then in terms of activity, I got them to do these kind of story game activities, which is sort of a scenario for a role play. So some of those involved them being a group of detectives trying to solve the case together. Others might be where the detective was interviewing a suspect, and so they have to think about the interview questions. The suspect has to try to give their answers in a way that links up with the evidence, and so it allows the learner to kind of put themselves in different sort of characters' perspectives as they go. But as part of this story game activity, what I propose in the chapter is that you kind of have one person who is acting as the storyteller. They provide sort of challenges or prompts for the people in the activity, and then the people doing the activity, their role is to try to come up with solutions or decide how the characters are going to behave in that scenario, and they work it out together. So that's the concept. I think that's already been 5 minutes. So what we're going to do is now I'm going to move into an activity where we're going to use this document, and I want to give you a moment to try and think of a few ideas for your own way that you could apply this. So if you could, I'm going to give the link to this document. Can I just check? Can you all see the Google document that I've got on my screen here?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, excellent. So I'm going to put the link to that in the chat. And what we're going to do is try to fill out this table, and you can put your name and your discipline in here, and then you can spend a moment to think about an immersive story setting that you could use. Maybe if you have any ideas for an assessment, you can put that in there. And then if you have an idea for a kind of scenario-based role-play activity you could get learners to do, you could add that in the final column. So I'm just going to add a few more rows in the table, just in case we have too many people for the number of rows. But feel free to just find your own empty row in the table, and you can make a start. So I can already see a couple of people have come in and started thinking about this. And again, it might be helpful to think of a genre, right? So in your discipline, it might not be, you might not have a setting like a film noir, but you might have something that could link, for example, to a sci-fi story or a romance story or some other kind of genre. And then thinking about how you can link sort of learning outcomes to some goals that the characters in the story might have. So hopefully everyone's able to access that document. I can see quite a few people already typing away. And if you don't want to put your real name in the first column, you can put a nickname in. That's absolutely fine as well. Isabel, can I just check how much time we've got?
Suffering from the unmute lack of. I was too engrossed in the Google
sorry, yeah.
Doc. We're good on time, so we do need to have wound up by 25 past. So we've got 20 minutes left, 15-20 minutes left.
Oh, great. Okay, longer than I thought. So that's good.
If we finish early, I'm sure nobody will mind. But yeah, we're not tight on time at the moment because everybody's been very well behaved.
So that does mean you can spend a bit of time to give this a little bit of thought and try sort of developing it out. And if you like, you can think about it first and then come into the document and add some ideas. Oh, brilliant. Beth has mentioned an article she's written about this. How fantastic. I've added that into the document, Beth. I hope that's okay. So there's a link to that at the top of the document.
Oh, yeah. It's based, I think, on sort of computer gaming research that they did, but there's stuff there that can transfer over to you can interpret it in a sort of student focused way.
Tab, can you remind us what the assessment bit is? I think somebody else is already sort of. So is that whether it's on the product or on the or maybe reflection or?
Well, I guess it's just thinking about how you would create an assessment that would link in with the story setting that you've come up with. So in my case, I had this kind of idea for a sort of film noir setting with a detective, and so I thought, well, they will assemble a sort of portfolio of evidence, right, when they're doing an investigation. But there might be other examples, like, what other kinds of assessment could we use? So, for example, I teach a module about higher education teaching, and maybe for an immersive story setting, I might come up with a dystopian. It could be something like a dystopian future where education has been banned, right? All higher education has been banned. All reading and books have been banned. Kind of Fahrenheit 451 sort of scenario. And maybe my characters are, the learners on the course. They're part of like an underground resistance movement against this banning of education, right? And so what could I ask them to do for their assessment? Well, maybe I get them to design some sort of an like a teaching, like a pop-up teaching flash mob, resistance activity or something, right? So they have to come up with some kind of active learning activity, and say how they would kind of embed that in how they would get people to notice it in order to get the message about how important higher education teaching is. So I could get them to come up with that activity. That would be the assessment. And then in terms of the sort of story game activity, it could be getting them to actually role play, doing one of these kind of teaching sessions that they've created, and some of them play the role of the learner, some of them play the role of the teacher. Of course, you could just change this for different settings, but that's an example. And I'm actually going to write it in the document now while you continue your writing.
Thanks, Tab. That gave me some inspiration.
Excellent. If anyone else has questions, feel free to ask.
Have you seen some of the comments in the chat?
Yeah, I just saw. Yeah. Was I at Play Learn this summer? I wasn't. I've been to some of the other Play conferences, but I wasn't there this summer. Although the one coming up next summer is going to be at Sussex. So hopefully, well, that's the Playful Learning Conference. But hopefully, some of you will be able to make it to that.
Yeah, that was my question. It was just there was a really cool session on using story game based learning to teach film history. So I thought it might be something you'd be interested in. I've got my notes if you want to have a look at them.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. Thanks, Erica.
Yeah, I'll try and remember to send them across. It was super interesting. It had vampires.
I mean, anytime we can involve vampires into higher education, things get a bit more interesting. So, Antonella, you have a question about what type of skills will students demonstrate by engaging in this assessment?
Yes, please. Yes. I read the story game assessment, and yeah, I'm interested to know what type of skills or knowledge do you want them to demonstrate?
Okay, and are you talking about the example assessment that I gave just now, or the one about the film noir?
The one about the film noir.
Okay. So, what kind of skills do I want them to engage in when creating this portfolio? So, I guess it's research skills, right? So, they have to go out and find information. They have to critical thinking for evaluating the sources that they've been provided with or that they find themselves. So, there's critical thinking, research skills. There's and all of this would be captured in the rubric, right, that you're using to assess whatever it is that they're creating. I guess the other thing is to demonstrate their knowledge of the films that they're analyzing, including the kind of contextual information around those films from the research they've done. And I guess there's the quality of communication, right, in the way that they put together their portfolio, the way that they write their the way that they write their kind of the notes that they submit as part of the portfolio, their reflections. So those would be the key things that I was looking at for that assessment. But one of the good things about portfolio assessment is that it's quite flexible, right? So you could tailor it to assess different types of skills and different types of learning outcomes.
Yeah, I was just wondering, sorry, I don't want to take much of your time, but
okay.
It's an interesting activity. I'm thinking if they have to play the role of the detective, usually a detective would search for clues to solve a case. Yeah, so are you looking for skills such as how to find for clues or
well, that's part of the research, yeah. So I was asking them to look for clues online. So it's kind of a mixture, right? So I'd created this murder case, and I'd sort of the clues were based on bits of things that they needed to research on the internet. So there's a kind of a web quest thing. And those clues were also linked to the films that they were supposed to study for that module. You see what I'm saying? So there's kind of an element of them trying to find those clues, but also evaluate the clues and then apply it to the learning for the content that the module was based on.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Do you have any ideas about how it could apply to your discipline?
Oh, is that a question for me?
Well, it could be for you, yeah, because you asked the question. So I just thought it might be interesting to hear.
Well, I'm a learning designer. I don't teach, so my job is more about supporting the academics and give them ideas and ensure that whatever assessment they think of, they align to the first one. So that is why I was asking what type of skills
Yeah.
or knowledge are the students supposed to demonstrate as a result of this engagement?
Yeah, definitely. I think that what I really like about using this sort of approach, right, is that it ties in really well with the idea of constructive alignment and backwards design in learning design because that's how stories are designed as well, right? So the character has a goal and there are kind of challenges that they face along the way, and you kind of start from the end of the story and work backwards. So sort of like the way that you design a story is quite similar to the way that you design a course, and I think in some ways it's like helpful as a kind of more friendly way because most people are familiar with stories. It kind of gives people an easy way into thinking about learning design as well.
By coincidence, I started yesterday trying to have a go at seeing if I could create an escape room that would teach people how to make escape rooms, which is a bit. Don't know if I'll manage it, but it's.
Oh, nice.
I'll have a play around with it.
So, Tab, is there anything else you wanted to talk us through? And has anybody got any questions for Tab?
Well, so one thing I was going to say, I'm just looking at the document. There's a lot of really nice ideas in here. I was thinking, well, yeah, number one, does anyone have any questions about this and how they would apply it? And number two, does anyone want to share any of the ideas that they've come up with? Feel free to unmute or type in the chat.
I was just going to ask, I've literally just submitted a module change form, which means I can, rather than doing I normally do an end of term MCQ exam online, which as you can imagine is sort of very easy to cheat on. And so I've changed that to make it a portfolio. And I was wondering if you think, you know, whether it'd be possible to use this idea to sort of gamify a way that they can, I guess, demonstrate their learning outcomes across the entire module. That's what I'm thinking. So I've got to design something new for next year. So this is giving me, I don't know, a bit of an idea. I've got a very small idea. I just wondered what your views are on if it should be targeted towards something quite specific, an element of a module, or if it would work across, gauging their knowledge and understanding of an entire module's content.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's quite flexible. So you could just focus it on a particular element of a module, a particular activity, a particular task. But I think it's in some ways more powerful when you create the whole module in that sort of image. But there are risks, and actually I can see in the chat one of the questions that Karen had was, you know, what's the feedback that students have about it? So I think it's one of those things that any kind of gamification and any kind of, I guess, embellishment of kind of just what's the assessment? What do I need to do to complete the assessment? Is often like quite divisive for students. So some of you might be familiar with. I think we talked about it last time, but there's an article by Delorier et al. And Delorier et al. Did some research recently where it was about real learning, actual learning versus our perception of learning, right? And basically what they found is that we're not very good at judging when real learning's happening. So most people prefer to be lectured to in quite a traditional way and not do any active learning, but active learning actually resulted in better results in the assessment. So one thing I did find when getting feedback from students is that there will always be some students who will give you, some negative feedback based on this kind of thing, right? Because some students will feel like it's not necessary, it's not going to affect my grade, so why are we doing it? But there's also quite a lot of evidence in the research about how using these kind of approaches can actually really enhance learning and improve performance on assessments. So one thing I would say, if you're going to do it for the whole module, right, especially, but even if you're doing it for a small element, I would really encourage you to explain why you're doing it and give some rationale and actually discuss it with the learners. And maybe discuss, maybe make it flexible so they don't have to do it. They don't have to participate in the story game element of it. They can just do the assessment in their own way, but give them that flexibility. Yeah, Beth, I think that is the one. And I think there was one other question as well, wasn't there?
I think you might have sort of answered it, because Karen asked about what feedback have you got from your students about this? Sadly seem to enjoy sitting back traditional approaches.
Yeah, but what I would also say though is that I find that particularly learners from backgrounds that are kind of more non-traditional or that often struggle in higher education, I found that often learners from those sorts of backgrounds actually do better with these kinds of approaches and are very receptive to them and more motivated. And that's also true with active learning approaches generally, right? So there's also research that shows that active learning approaches are good at kind of reducing the awarding gap and supporting learners who are from non-traditional backgrounds. So a lot of learners will love it and be really motivated, but there'll be some learners that don't like it. So I guess give them that flexibility.
Yeah, and the other thing I found is the more when a whole course embraces it, and I think I'm not sure that, as Karen was alluding to, some of her colleagues I think maybe don't embrace it, you have the same thing, and I just think that's where it's so much harder for students to swap between being really doing active learning and then traditional lectures, and that's where some of it, if it comes in as well. But that's only from my personal experience. Have we got any final questions for Tab? Sarah's, do fill in the evaluation form. Sarah has shared the link in the, oh, I'm doing strange things to my computer. Sarah has shared the link in the chat. Otherwise, Tab, can I swap to sharing my screen for a moment?
Yeah, sure. So you go ahead. And thanks for everyone participating in the activity. I love the ideas here. We've got, ideas for using romance story for teaching about music. We've got Wizard School for teaching about learning design. We've got all sorts of really interesting ideas here. So feel free to come back to this document. And thank you all. I'll pass you back to Isabel.
Yes, thank you very much, Tab. That was yes, definitely some food for thought there. So that was brilliant. So I just wanted to finish off by reminding people about next week's session. So we've had 3 fun-packed sessions on we've had 9 ideas for active learning, assessment of feedback. And the final session is really, so what do we do with all this learning? We attend CPD events, and what do we do for all this learning? So this last session is tied to the learning outcome for the CPD, which is to to design a learning session resource using a selection from the active learning ideas presented at any one of the 3 events in the series. It can be very, very flexible, so don't panic if you think, oh, I'm not sure I want to do that. Can't get my slides to move on now. So, and the whole point behind this is there's this opportunity to earn a champion badge. So to earn this badge, a recipient has produced an artifact of some arranged or event or something demonstrating meeting that learning outcome. So it doesn't, you know, it could just be planning an activity, something like that. And so Tab, I believe you're facilitating next next week, so we know that it's going to guarantee to be active and lots of fun. I just wanted to emphasize that fact that the session is there to support you to get this champion badge and to reflect a bit more deeply. So there's a bit more of a, I'm not quite sure what Tab's got in mind for us, but a bit of help to reflect on the learning that we've taken from these 3 sessions.
Yeah, and it will be I think what I'd like to state to everybody is, like, we want to make this as easy as possible for you to do. So as Isabel said, it's very flexible, and in a way it's about thinking about maybe there's something that you already are doing or already want to do, like maybe you want to run a workshop, or maybe you want to create some kind of resource, and then just linking it to, you know, some of these ideas about assessment. But what we'll be doing next time is everyone will be together so we can give some guidance and also give you time, because I know it's hard to find time in your schedule. We can give you time to actually work on it there and then in the session, and possibly even, you know, finish producing something, or at least make a start. So and you'll be able to ask questions and have the support of others who are doing the same thing. So we look forward to seeing you next week for that.
Brilliant. So has anybody got any final questions or anything else they wanted to mention? Otherwise, please do make sure you fill in the evaluation forms, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Is there anything I've forgotten to mention, team?
I think you forgot to mention what a great job you've done hosting the session. So thank you
yes,
very much.
and I was going to say, I have forgotten to mention to do a big thank you to our 3 presenters today, especially to Heather, who stepped in at the last minute, but also to Richard and to Tab for another excellent session.
Yeah, thanks everybody.